Good evening. It is 7:02 p.m. on Monday, September 21st, 2020, and I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. Attending this evening's board meeting are board members Christine Malik, Tim Paulus, Allegra Smishek, and Peter Tensing. Board member Paula Cole joins us virtually, so you'll see her wave on the screen here in just a moment. And I am Crystal Brackey. We are also thrilled to be joined again by one of our student board members. Naomi Ferguson is with us online as well. Hey, Naomi. And we may also be joined in person by Lucy Luna. We are also joined virtually this evening by Superintendent Yanowski. Good evening, Steve. And have with us in person several district staff members who you will hear from throughout the agenda, specifically Assistant Superintendent Dr. LaTanya Daniels, Executive Director of Special Programs Dr. Mary Clarkson, and Chief Human Resources and Administrative Officer Craig Holge. Richfield Public Schools' mission statement is that we strive to inspire and empower each individual to learn, grow, and excel, and we will keep that focus at the center of our discussions this evening. So we want to welcome those of you who are watching us online right now or in the future via YouTube. Thanks for being with us. You will see that those of us here in person are practicing social distancing and complying with the statewide mask order. Though the executive order allows for the removal of masks while speaking during public meetings subject to the open meeting law, such as this one, I'm going to keep wearing my mask and strongly encourage others to do the same. And then also, if you're watching and maybe having a hard time hearing or reading lips, obviously through the masks, please consider utilizing the closed caption feature in YouTube. It'll be on the lower right-hand corner as you watch the video replay, if that makes it easier to follow our conversation. I was very impressed with actually how accurate it was when I watched it back. So with that, our first item of business this evening is to approve the agenda before us. As this is a routine business item, I'll just briefly pause to see if there are any comments or questions related to the agenda. Seeing and hearing none, is anyone prepared to move the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Tensing and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the agenda is approved. So we are now going to move into the information and proposals non-action items section of the agenda. We begin tonight with time for public comment, and I am pleased that we did have one member of our community who requested the opportunity to address the board and the public at tonight's meeting. So before I read this first comment, I'll provide a brief overview of our guidelines. As outlined in Board Policy 216, we welcome comments from members of the public. We ask that you ensure your comments are consistent with our policy, especially around protecting the privacy rights of individual students and staff members. Members of the public have 3 minutes to speak unless translation is required, in which case 6 minutes are provided. We have both virtual and in-person ways for members of the community to participate in public comment, which we hope encourages participation in whatever way feels safe and accessible for community members. Thank you in advance for sharing your thoughts with us, and know that even though we will not be responding in the moment this evening, we will take your comments seriously, and you may receive follow-up from us or from a member of the staff. So as I mentioned, I received a written comment for this evening's board meeting, and it is from Richfield resident and parent Stephanie Maccabee. And Stephanie, I'll apologize in advance if I mispronounced your name. I attended the school board meeting 2 weeks ago. I observed that the meeting was necessarily heavily focused upon COVID-19 protocol for student attendance, among other things. I observed that the discussion of SROs was totally omitted. While I do understand that because pandemic protocols took precedence, I do not want to set aside the treatment of students by SROs as discussed and exposed during the summer of 2020. Will the school board discuss SROs again and involve more school administration in the interactions, police record keeping, and broadening of responsibilities away from the police as appropriate at some point sooner than the middle or end of the school year? I believe that school board members are blurring the statements I made at the last meeting where public comments were allowed. I did mention removal of funds from policing activities that would be better tasked out to psychologists, social workers, and counselors. I did not blindly state defund the police. That statement is oversimplified to get a complex idea across. The same as Black Lives Matter has become cliche and also defensiveness inducing to those not Black. I share in the opinion that the statement would be better received if it said Black Lives Matter too. Please do not misconstrue and take words out of context and fit them into a convenient cliche to justify closing the discussion. I understand that students want the police as well. Police are important and serve a great purpose. My assertion is that they should not be delegated responsibilities that better fit other professions. If paying them that amount of funding, mask malfunction, if paying them that amount of funding negates using other professionals, I am just asking for the board to consider freeing up those funds to consult with other professionals. People expressing needs do not simply need to be controlled, as is the main reaction of policing. People have underlying issues, and there are professionals better trained to handle them. Thank you, and thank you all for what you do for our children. So that ends Stephanie's public comment. And Stephanie, thank you again for taking the time to share with us and the public. And just so you know, I will be speaking to aspects of this comment also later in the meeting during the information and questions from the board section of the agenda in terms of future discussion for us as a school board. The next opportunity for public comment will be at our board meeting on Monday, October 19th. So with that, we will move into the superintendent's update. Oh, and hello, Lucy. Our other school board member with us this evening from our student team, Lucy, has joined us virtually as well. I'm sorry I didn't see you join and I missed the chance to properly introduce you. We're excited to have you with us. So, the superintendent's update this evening, containing two important items for us. First, an update on the beginning of the school year, which I know we're super eager to hear from Naomi and Lucy, how they have been experiencing things so far. And then second, an overview of the district's COVID-19 response and reporting process. So Superintendent Yanowski, over to you.
Thank you, and I want to join you in welcoming Lucy and Naomi back to our board. We are in the process of recruiting a third member, most likely a junior, as these two powerful women were juniors last year and continue with us this year. We'll have a new student on this year who hopefully will stay on in the future. Also, before I start with business, I want to thank and congratulate Scott Nelson, our board videographer. Scott has taken another job, and this will be his final meeting with us. In Scott's time, he has obviously helped us set up the boardroom, which allows us to live stream in the way that we are doing now. And he's really helped to modify and improve the way we have videoed our board meetings. So we did give a present, a Spartan sweatshirt to Scott, and we want to remind him that we are excited for you in your journey, and we want you to know that even though you may leave us in Richfield, you will always be in the
What the camera may not have just captured was the giving of the sweatshirt to Scott right here in the middle of the board meeting.
Thank you, thank you. So with that, I'm going to transition into the two items in the superintendent report. Presentation by me, which is a narrated PowerPoint, and a report on the COVID-19 decision tree by Dr. Mary Clarkson. So in her report, Dr. Clarkson will outline and describe how we're handling cases, but also suspected cases of COVID-19 in Richfield schools. Before we move to that, however, I'm going to put myself on mute, and we will hear virtual me present in a PowerPoint.
This is Superintendent Yanowski. This smiling faces of our students and
We're having issues because we're trying to do too many things at once here.
Okay, we're working on the technical difficulties for those of you watching. Steve, in the meantime, get ready to do this again live if necessary.
I will be absolutely ready if
Okay.
that's what it takes.
We'll take just another couple minutes to
this
see if
is
we can figure it out.
Superintendent Yanowski here. This is Super.
I think we might have to do it live,
Okay,
because once you get everything going, it's just too much.
okay. Steve, are you ready?
I am looking for my magical script that I use. And just a second.
Okay, I was gonna say if it would be easier, we can also flip the order and have Dr. Clarkson start with the COVID reporting process, if that would give you a little bit of time to prepare.
That would be great. I'd love
Great.
that. Thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, School Board. Tonight I'm here to share with the School Board the district's COVID-19 response and reporting procedures. I first want to begin with emphasizing the importance and focus we place on preventative strategies. These strategies, when implemented consistently by our students, staff, and community, have the greatest ability to significantly reduce the spread of COVID-19. Wearing masks, practicing social distancing, and increased hygiene practices, including frequent hand washing and cleaning of high-touch surfaces, are practices that are embedded within the school day. We also ask parents and guardians, as well as staff, to conduct a health screening prior to sending their children to school or coming to work. We need staff and students to stay home if they are sick. This includes if you have symptoms of a common cold, as these symptoms are associated with COVID-19. We know this is difficult for families and staff, but it is critical to ensure students will be able to remain in school. When students or staff come to school when ill, the district is challenged with decisions on how we will be responding to undiagnosed illnesses in the school and the potential risks these situations pose to others. We are asking that both students and staff remain home when you are sick and stay home until you are symptom-free for 24 hours. Within school, we have also implemented additional preventative measures. We provide staff and students with personal protective equipment. Buildings have hand sanitizer stations as students enter the buildings. Students remain in pods to the maximum extent possible, and additional cleaning protocols have been implemented in all of our schools. Practicing these preventative strategies are our best defense against the spread of COVID-19. The health and safety of our students and staff are our priority. When we have a student who becomes ill at school or is presenting with symptoms related to COVID-19, the district has identified a 3-step response that will be followed. We will assess, and we will isolate or exclude as necessary. The first step is assess. When a student reports to the classroom teacher or the classroom teacher notices that the student is ill, they contact health services. The health services staff determines the best way to evaluate the student. This can either be by going to the student's classroom or having the student report to the isolation area for the student to be evaluated. Based on the assessment made by the health services staff, the student either returns to the class or another appropriate space if isolation is not required, or is to remain in the isolation area. Second, isolate. If the student is presenting with symptoms related to COVID-19, they remain in the isolation area until they are picked up from school. The isolation area may be located in the health service office if there is an area where students can be separated. If this is not an option, the building will locate another room that will be used as an isolation area. And finally, exclusion. Students who are isolated and sent home because they are presenting with symptoms related to COVID-19 must remain out of school based on the Department of Health's decision tree. When students are sent home, they are sent with an information letter that explains the specific symptoms the student reported or was presenting, directions for the parents on how long the student must remain home, and information on where they can have their child tested for COVID-19. The parents and guardians will also receive a copy of the Department of Health's decision tree. Next, I will explain the response protocol that will be followed when we receive a report of an individual testing positive for COVID-19. Once I explain the process, I will walk through a couple of examples to give you a better sense of how this will play out in an actual situation. So let me get started. When a staff person receives a report of an individual testing positive for COVID-19, the first thing they do is to notify the principal or site administrator and the health services staff. Each school's health service staff is the COVID contact for the site, and they will be working closely with the principal or site administrator and the district COVID coordinator throughout this whole process. The health services staff, once notified, will then contact the district COVID coordinator. For us, that's Phoebe Anderson, who is our district licensed school nurse. As the COVID coordinator, she will be the point person coordinating the whole response process. Once the COVID coordinator is notified, she contacts the regional support team. Now, as a reminder, this is a state-level COVID response team created by the Department of Health and the Department of Education to support schools in responding to cases of COVID-19. The regional support team provides 3 critical supports to schools. First, they confirm the positive case of COVID-19. Second, they coordinate contact tracing. The district will partner with the regional support team on this as it pertains to close contacts within the school. And third, they advise the district on close contact notification and communication. The district coordinator, COVID coordinator, and the regional support team are in close contact throughout the whole process. Once the contact tracing is complete, the regional support team provides the COVID coordinator with directives on who should be notified as close contacts by the school and provide a sample close contact notification letter that's drafted by the Department of Health. The COVID coordinator then connects with the school principal or site administrator, who will bring their site team together to coordinate communication. At this point in the process, the focus is on providing clear and timely communication to those staff and students most directly impacted and providing information to the school community as a whole. The communication process will be directed by the principal or the site administrator. They will oversee the process of communication by first directing the team to call families and staff who were identified as having close contact. Second, they will be sending the close contact notification letter through the email to all close contacts. And third, the principal or site administrator will send an email to all families and staff at the site notifying them that there was a confirmed case of COVID-19 at the site, and those who had close contact have been notified. Finally, we will follow the regional support team's directives on who needs to be quarantined. Now, I know that was a lot of information, so I'm going to walk through a couple of examples so that you understand how this would actually play out. So the first example I'm going to walk through is if we had a student who we found out there was a report of that they tested positive for COVID-19. So in this example, there's a Centennial student in 3rd grade whose parent contacts the principal and lets them know that their child tested positive for COVID-19. So the Centennial principal, who would be Ms. Mahoney, notifies health services and would contact the COVID coordinator, Phoebe Anderson. The COVID coordinator then would notify the regional support team, and they would work together through the contact tracing and all the way through that process. Then the COVID coordinator, Phoebe, would communicate with the Centennial COVID team, which would include the principal and the health services staff and myself. And she would share with them the recommendations from the Department of Health and provide the communication documents that would be used for communicating with the close contacts. The Centennial COVID team then, which The principal identifies who would be on that communication team, and it would probably include some outreach workers because we have families that speak multiple languages. Contacts the families directly whose students need to be quarantined. In this case, it would likely be the whole third grade pod, as they would typically be the ones in close contact, and contact staff who need to be quarantined. Then the Centennial principal would send out a general communication to the whole Centennial community to inform them of the confirmed case, not sharing any identifying details, and to let them know that those who need to be quarantined have already been informed. And then all staff members who have to be quarantined and are unable to work from home would fill out a COVID leave request with HR and put their information into the employee absence system. So that's how one example would run. The next example that I want to walk through, because I think they're handled just a little bit different, is if we had an employee in another department that would report that they tested positive for COVID-19. So in this case, it's a food service worker that works at Richfield High School, informs their direct supervisor, the kitchen manager, that they tested positive for COVID-19. The kitchen manager then would inform the director of nutrition services, which would be Michael Manning, and the COVID coordinator, Phoebe Anderson. Again, Phoebe would connect with the regional support team and they would work through the process. Then the COVID coordinator would communicate with the high school COVID team, which would be Principal Collins, Darby Peterson, who is their nurse, and would share the recommendations from the Department of Health and provide communication documents that would need to be shared. The Richfield High School team, who the principal would identify for communication, would contact families directly of those students who need to be quarantined. However, in this situation, since it was a food service worker, there would probably be a low likelihood that there would be any students that would need to be quarantined. So then they would also connect with the director of nutrition services, Michael Manning, who would then connect with staff who need to be quarantined. The principal would then send out a general communication to the whole high school community to inform them of a positive case of COVID on the site and to let them know that those who needed to be quarantined have been informed. And then again, you would go through the same notification to HR, and then they would input their information into the employee absence system. So those are two probably more common type of situations that we would see and how we would respond to a positive case of COVID within the school setting. Next, I want to talk through how we track and report data. Reporting and tracking both confirmed cases and cases of COVID-like illness will be a critical step in managing an effective public health response. We've already discussed the thresholds for moving from hybrid to distance learning based on confirmed COVID-19 case rates in Hennepin County. In addition to this parameter, the Department of Health is asking schools to track and report COVID-like illnesses, just like we track and report influenza-like illness. While the case definition for COVID-like illness is based only on symptoms and does not indicate confirmed COVID-19, following the rates of COVID-like illness in the community, along with understanding parameters of COVID-19 testing, will allow public health officials to more clearly estimate the burden of undiagnosed COVID-19 in our community. When Richfield families participate in openly reporting cases to their school, they are providing important intelligence that helps public health authorities to mindfully implement measures to maximize safety while minimizing disruption. An ounce of prevention in this situation is clearly worth a pound of cure. At each school, the attendance line message asks parents to indicate if their student is ill with COVID-related symptoms. Our health services will track reported absences related to COVID-19 symptoms, just like we track and report influenza-like illness. Health Services and the district COVID coordinator will track COVID-19 cases by school and site and will report these cases by building on the district COVID webpage. The COVID webpage will also report the Hennepin County COVID-19 cases per 10,000. And as you can see, this is what our COVID-19 webpage looks like, and that's where we would be reporting the cases. Okay. Finally, I want to provide you with an overview of the district COVID-19 coordination structure. Minnesota Department of Health is the state level support, and they coordinate the regional support teams and work with local public health, which for Richfield is Bloomington Public Health. At the district level, we have the district COVID coordinator, who is Phoebe Anderson, and our school nurses, Darby Peterson, who's a licensed school nurse at the high school, and Joshana Ingram, who is our registered nurse at the middle school, as well as Lisa Nagus, who's our Director of Human Resources, and myself, who make up the district level team. Building teams, led by the principal or the site administrator, are made up of the health services staff and a team designated by the principal to support communication. The coordination across these teams is what makes and will make the response process work. Now, before I wrap up, I do need to acknowledge and give a huge thank you to Phoebe Anderson for all of her commitment and work as she's provided the district with her expertise in creating processes and systems for managing through this pandemic. And also Lisa, our Director of Human Resources, who has developed many of the processes and procedures that support our district staff. Now, I know this was a lot of information, and I would like to open it up for questions to all of you now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Clarkson. Paula, I will give you a chance if you would like to go first. You can kick us off. Otherwise, we'll come back to you once everybody here in the room has had a chance to go.
Whichever way you like, dear.
I mean, you're off mute. Why don't you go ahead with anything that's top of mind, and then we'll come back to you at the end as well.
All right. So, I think I'm curious to, well, I don't think, I know. What is this looking like in real life in the school? Because the plans are really good, but, well, not bad. And I'd like to know how's it going? Couple weeks in.
Well, I know that there will be a positive case of COVID that we will have to respond to. Right now, I think that we continue, it's going well. I think we continue to work through finding the best ways to respond to individuals who come to school sick, either staff or students, because in those cases, just about everything falls under the umbrella of COVID-like symptoms. And so we are working on generating some key messages that can go out to our staff in particular to ensure them that we do have a way in which we are responding, and those that need to be responded to and notified if they have close contact will get that notification. I think that there's anxiety in particular around staff when it comes to hearing of students that are asked to stay home from school or report to the office when they're, or to the isolation area when they're sick.
Right. And I think one of the things that needs to be emphasized, as Mary pointed out, the signs and symptoms of COVID are so nonspecific that the vast majority of individuals who show up having a symptom probably don't have the disease. And so I think it's really important one of the reasons that I had asked Mary to put this together, and thank you very much for an outstanding presentation, is that we, I think, really want to reassure our staff as well as our families that if we do have an actual case, a real case, that we have a process in place to move quickly to respond to that in a very transparent fashion. And that if you are hearing rumors, you can be content that those are rumors. Because when there's real information, it will be disseminated quickly and thoroughly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would add also a big thank you to Phoebe Anderson and the team that put it together. It's very clear, easy to follow. I really appreciated the 2 examples that you walked through. I think that's really helpful. Do we have that available to our families? Like, is there a spot on the website or somewhere where they could just see how it all happens?
I know that I'm meeting with Jennifer Valley tomorrow to start creating some of these key messages, and I can talk about how can we shorten this up and provide some examples of what this would look like
Yeah,
on
I
our
think
COVID website.
Yeah, I think an example would be really helpful to families, to parents and kids too, so
Absolutely.
very nice.
Thanks.
I had a couple really specific questions, actually. So the first is, as we got the quick glimpse of the COVID-19 page on the website, I saw, everything is still 0 for all of the specific schools, and the date, I think it's helpful to say it was last updated, I believe it said September 15th. So my question is, what is the frequency with which people can expect that will be updated? Just because I can imagine somebody looking at that and wondering, is that actually still accurate, or is it last updated because there hasn't been anything since then?
Absolutely. I would, and we didn't decide exactly. So far, knock on wood, we haven't had a case, but I would imagine I can make a decision. We can update it weekly, I think is a real practical timeline in which we can have that information updated.
I think that would be good, and I would just put on there, this information will be updated weekly, so people know that that is the expectation. And then the second question was about the 2 examples, which I also found helpful. And I know that the general communication that goes out will not share identifying details, but I am curious if it is going to specify whether it was a student or whether it was an adult in the building.
We had a lot of discussion and made the decision not to identify whether it was a student or a staff or an adult. Didn't find that information would be necessary for anyone to know in that case. So we went back and forth and decided not to.
Okay.
And again, I think it's really important to point out that the purpose of that level of transparency is really to stay ahead of the rumor mill. And we know that we're a small community. Our buildings are even smaller microcosms. And obviously, rumors will fly, and sort of quote-unquote public knowledge, sort of would get disseminated in any community, despite everyone's best efforts to be confidential and maintain privacy and all that kind of stuff. And so the acknowledgement from building that yes, there is a case, and yes, we are going to be letting you know as soon as we have a case. I mean, that's the information that needs to be shared. And yes, we're on top of this, and yes, the notification has already happened to those that are close contacts. That allows us to not be in a position of not acknowledging the obvious, right? Because if you're not acknowledging the obvious, then that just sort of drives further anxiety. And also, I think, can hopefully allow, our hope is that this allows all the staff to simply rely upon that communication mechanism and not feel like anyone needs to take it into their own hands.
I would like to kick it back to our virtual board members. Paula, Naomi, and/or Lucy, if there are any questions or comments you have on this topic before we move on.
Hi.
I'm just glad that, there's a plan, for everything. Because I didn't hear about anything, before you presented. So I'm just glad that, being a student and being in the schools is, I'm not like scared to go to school every day, but like it's always something that's in the back of your head. And I'm just glad that there's a procedure already for when something does happen. So, yeah.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think good point about making sure that our students know the plan as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right.
I think if I just wanted to just reiterate and emphasize one further point that I think Mary made very eloquently, and that is that as a school, as a community, it's cliche that we are in this together, but this is an example of where the participation of families, not only in staying home when you're sick, keeping your kids home when they're sick, monitoring your kids' health, and openly reporting, that is being a good citizen, a good member of the community, and that is actually keeping all of us able to have more opportunity, because if we can be on the leading edge of in any sort of pandemic situation, there's an opportunity which one hopes to get to do what's called containment. And containment can only happen when you are capturing that case very early, before there's an opportunity for several sort of transmission chains to occur. So that's where we're trying to develop a process that's going to move quickly, and in order for that to execute, we do need to make sure that and understand that everybody is a partner, and everybody is contributing, and everybody's on this team. Thank you. Yep.
Okay, so we will now head back to the first weeks of school update with Steve participating virtually.
All right, so let us try this again. And I do not currently see a PowerPoint, so
It's coming.
It looks like I'm up on the live screen. Can I get someone to confirm?
I can try to rerun it again for a different computer here. We want to give it one more shot.
Steve, would you like to try the recorded, or do you just want to go?
Let's try the recorded, but I am ready if it doesn't work on the first wing.
Sounds good.
Awkward wait time. I'll just go. We can just have it up as PowerPoint.
Sounds good.
I figured it out. Well, just kidding.
One setting and I got it.
Okay, just a second. Hold on.
Add it sets the wrong microphone.
This is Superintendent Yanowski here tonight to talk with you about our launch of school. I will review our first 2 weeks of school and share some of our successes and our challenges. Thematically, I would say that we had an amazing, great, and successful start to the school year. We need to thank and congratulate every one of our staff, students, and families for working together during these extremely difficult times in a way that supported the successful start of Richfield schools in the 2020-2021 school year. That said, we have also identified a large number of challenges, needed improvements, and honestly, areas where we can, must, and will get better, and quickly. Our first week of distance learning shows many of these challenges. We were not able to communicate clearly and effectively to everyone. Our plans were not solid, as we were in a position where we may have had to shift to all distance education even prior to the start of school. and we were not able to deliver fully rigorous instruction because our families received their materials throughout the week and we did not want to leave any of our students or families behind. That also meant that while most of our activities were designed to be introductory and asynchronous, left people wondering how had we actually improved since our spring distance learning. It's fair to assess week one by saying that we successfully put all of the things in place to make sure our hybrid was able to launch, and that the week also helped ensure that our students and families would be ready and prepared to engage in distance learning. Our distance goals from week one going forward raised the bar significantly, and now all of our goals are around academic achievement and social emotional support and health of our students. Putting this into deeper context, just opening schools was a huge challenge. The restrictions caused by COVID-19 made it extremely challenging to launch schools, and those challenges are the stated reason of why many school districts have chosen to go with a fully distanced model. We have chosen to launch hybrid, which brings me to our second week. It was awesome to see the smiling faces of our students and staff as we brought students and staff together in our classrooms. The week beginning September 14th was a great reminder there are staff that need to be with their students. There are students that need to be with the staff. Similarly, during COVID, there are students and staff who need to interact at a distance from safe locations. Let's talk about some of these things more in depth. Current COVID infection rates in Hennepin County are approximately 15 cases per 10,000 residents. While numbers in other areas of the state and country continue to rise, the numbers in Hennepin County continue to drop. Prediction models from the state suggest that these numbers will continue to rise and fall back and forth throughout the fall and winter. We should not expect the numbers to remain stagnant or to stay the same. They will constantly be in a state of flux. The number of 15 cases per 10,000 places the recommendation of the governor, Centers for Disease Control, and Minnesota Department of Health at in-person for elementary and hybrid for secondary. If case numbers go above 20 per 10,000, which is where they were for most of the summer and likely will be for much of fall and winter, the suggested guidance is hybrid for all students. If case numbers go below 10 per 10,000 residents, they suggest the option of in-person for all students. Despite these ongoing fluctuating numbers, we anticipate remaining at hybrid for all students for the foreseeable future. Students and families choosing distance receive distance instruction either live, synchronous, or taped asynchronous daily. Our hybrid model brings kindergarten through second grade students into the building 4 days per week. Pre-K and grades 3 through 5 attend twice, while all secondary students attend once per week. When not in the building, each of these students receives distance instruction on the days where they are not scheduled to be present in Richfield schools. One board request was for administration to review student percentages to see who has chosen hybrid and who has chosen distance. As a reminder, these enrollment and demographic numbers are preliminary and unofficial. They will change significantly prior to the enrollment report that comes later this fall. As of Friday, Richfield was made up of 71% students of color, with our largest groups being 42% Latinx, 29% white, and 14% African American. There are slightly different demographic representations within our hybrid distance programs, as hybrid represents 64% students of color overall, and distance programming represents 80% students of color. Connecting these numbers to our overall enrollment, over 95% of anticipated students have been accounted for. However, that means that we have nearly 200 students where we are working diligently with outreach workers and social workers to connect to the student and their families. These numbers are similar to other years, and we continue to do outreach until we know the whereabouts and educational situation of every student every year. Our overall enrollment numbers suggest we'll end up with the October 1 official student count very close to our projections. We do, however, have some class size concerns that we are addressing, particularly in elementary. As a reminder, 50% capacity and social distancing requirements force us to keep all in-person portions of our hybrid program small. That means we need to subsidize some of these small class sizes with higher than desired classes in distance learning. It's also important to remember that we routinely make shifts and changes after the year has started as we find bubbles or areas where there are more students that we would want in one particular classroom with one particular student. Right now, we have already added classrooms in multiple areas of our elementary schools and are in the process of adding 2 more teachers, one at STEM and one at RDLS, both in kindergarten due to extremely high distance class sizes. In other elementary classrooms, we do range in size from 28 to 33 in distance at our largest numbers, and we're supporting those areas with added paraprofessional presence. We expect to continue to maneuver staffing throughout September as we finalize our enrollment and identify any other areas where we have higher than desired class sizes. Nutrition guideline changes that occurred up to the last minute are another great example of some of this year's challenges. We built a very strong program designed to feed all students effectively. Distance students can grab a packet of 5 meals. Hybrid students are fed on-site and also receive grab-and-go meals to take home. As a COVID-19 safety measure, all students eat with their pod in their classroom or outside. We will not generally be using lunchrooms for food service and large groups until further notice. On a regulations basis, we expected to charge students for food, but guidance changed a couple of days prior to the start of school that allows us to provide free meals to everyone. It also allows us to expand where we deliver food, not only in our buildings, but opens up the possibility of food throughout the community. While this spring we were able to deliver food throughout the community using our bus routes, we'll continue to examine our bus capabilities as we continue to review and determine capacity for this service. We would absolutely love to return to distributing food throughout the community, and we commit to examining our ability to do so. On top of our own service, we're pleased with the ongoing generosity of our partner organizations and our grant funding. Sheridan Story will provide food distribution at Richfield High School along with grab-and-go distribution. All 4 elementary schools will be able to increase their snack service as Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program Award occurred again this year, allowing over $100,000 of food distribution of fresh fruits and vegetables at each of our elementary schools daily. Transportation needs brought extremely large new challenges to our system. Each route needed to be scheduled with individual reserve seats. It also needed to accommodate that we only currently have 17 drivers. Communication was a challenge as we needed to hand route every single student and every address, meaning we could not share finalized plans until the last minute. We know this caused additional stress to students and families. While we started this week with plans for full, meaning 22 student capacity buses, we actually had about half the seats taken by actual riders. We had many families who had asked for transportation that then chose to drive their students last week. At the same time, we had students and families requesting bus service, particularly those who do not reside in a location that legally requires us to provide bus service, and so they were not necessarily able to receive a bus. This news is a mixed blessing. The good news is that we're finding that we have excess capacity and we're going to begin a process of adding students to our buses. The bad news is that for those families needing transportation, it will take weeks or even a month to complete this process. We have to contact every single family to check on their busing plans. We cannot give seats to newly assigned students unless those legally qualifying for the seat formally decline the service. Social workers and outreach workers along with school administration are partnering with transportation to move us all forward in this area. Inside the classrooms, we experienced 2 very different weeks. During our first week of distance learning, teachers worked together with students to create positive classroom environments with high expectations for all the students. We build expectations, rituals and routines, norms, relationships, and set up the systems to prepare us all for success throughout the school year. In week 2, our first week of hybrid instruction, which brought students into our building, teachers and students started a new journey with our hybrid model of instruction. Our elementary students learned their first math, reading, writing, science, and specialist lessons in the new normal. Our secondary students met with their advisors, walked through courses and content in Schoology, learned alongside their classroom teachers, and also toured their new school and participated in fun learning activities in and around their school community. Overall, our launch was a great success. We have many things to celebrate. We also have many areas and challenges to overcome as we move forward. With that, I will open it up for questions and comments.
So thank you for the presentation, and I'll see if there's anything else that Steve would like to add momentarily, but first I'm going to give a heads up to Naomi and Lucy that would love to hear from the 2 of you first before we hear from the rest of the board. So just consider that advance notice if there's anything you'd like to share. So Steve, any final words before we turn it over to our students?
I think I would just repeat sort of the overall theme. I'm really excited and proud of the team, staff, students, community that we were able to launch an open school, starting with distance and then moving to hybrid, which included our students back in the building. And then I would also add that as proud and as excited as I am on what we have done, we have a lot of work in the future. Building a system where every single system and every piece is new, because that is the way it is in COVID-19, means we have a lot of work to refine and improve every piece of everything that we're doing. And so we are excited about our success and committed to improving just about every single thing that we launched to make sure that we're providing the best possible program for our kids and families.
Thank you. So Lucy or Naomi, if either of you has anything that you would like to share about your experiences in these first 2 weeks and 1 day, or I guess technically 2 weeks, would love to hear from you.
I can go. Well, the first week we didn't really do much. It was just kind of like a trying to fully understand the online part of the curriculum for every class. So it was helpful having that 1 week where we just kind of were just trying to get used to it. And, you know, there was teachers who had some meets, there was teachers who didn't have meets, just kind of more for the classes that really required it and needed it. The second week, I love the way it's laid out. It's like the first 3 hours on Monday, advisory Tuesday. I have that whole day free. I could do all my homework in that day. I could work on anything that I didn't work on the past days. And then class on Thursday or class on Wednesday. And then I went to actual school on Thursday. I was really excited. I was really excited to see how that was going to play out. I have a wonderful advisory teacher, and she had us literally outside most of the time. We went to Woodlake Nature Center. We went to a walk to Woodlake Nature Center, and she was planning on doing some volunteering because since we're seniors, we need volunteer hours. So she was planning on giving us some community service hours and volunteering at Woodlake. And we also didn't do much that day because it was kind of just like, you know, trying to figure out how things were going to go. The next day we had advisory, and she gave us she asked us for our feedback, and everyone gave really good feedback, and I felt safe. Everyone else felt safe, so it was just really nice knowing that, you know, you can be safe even though all of this is going on, and we could still go back to school. So I really like how everything's going right now. I have no complaints.
Thank you, Lucy. It's always so good and so helpful to hear from you and just how you see things and how you're experiencing them.
Yeah. Thank you guys for like trying so hard, because I know you guys have put a lot of work into trying to make this happen, and you did it. So thank you.
We're still doing it. Naomi, I'm not sure if you're still with us. If so, would love to hear from you. Oh, awesome. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So online school started off really good. Besides Wi-Fi issues, everything was really smooth. And you can tell the teachers are way more prepared than they were in March when it was super sudden. And the teachers are also like just really welcoming, and they're patient with us as long as we're patient with them. You know, you can tell everyone is learning still, which is nice, and they're really patient with us. A lot of the teachers are not giving a lot of work yet, and they're like really just trying to let us kind of settle in, which is nice. And even like for my college classes, they're really doing their best to be like kind of messengers, because they have to stay on U of M curriculum, and they're doing a good job between that. And so you can just really see how much they care and how much effort everyone's putting in. Mm-hmm. I mean, the first day of hybrid, when everybody's coming in the door, they had everybody they could have possibly clapping for us and cheering and everything like that. What else would I like to share? Oh, and I even heard that this week or in a few weeks, they're gonna have free Wi-Fi at the school and study spaces and things like that, and the free meals and everything, and working with the Beacon program. And also, as a senior, this has provided me kind of with the opportunity to work with my senior classmates an advisory teacher on just like career planning and college planning, that some people who didn't have the support over the summer can do that now with this day on Thursday. So that's really nice. So yeah.
Fantastic. And again, so helpful to hear from you. And I love the specific thing that you called out about how people are giving patience to one another, and it needs to go both ways. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear from some of our other board members. Paula, you want to start us off?
Sure. I would like to say thank you to Steve for putting this report together, and to Mary Clarkson, of course, and oh my gosh, her name escaped me. We just talked about her earlier. But anyway, thank you everyone for all the information, very comprehensive. I enjoyed learning about the public transportation situation. And I really want to thank our student representatives, because as you probably know by now from me, I really like to know how school feels to our students, not just during the pandemic, but at all times. So thank you for sharing. And I feel that our kids in Richfield are in good hands, even though it's a really difficult time. So thank you for that. And I just, I don't know, Christine, you want to share something?
Sure. Okay. So I really appreciated the whole report, but also I especially want to point out the transparency that was shared with the challenges and the recognition that we still have work to do, and that is happening, because I think that's just a really important thing to recognize. You don't just plan all summer, snap your fingers, and they're here and everything goes great. It is a lot of work, and it will continue, I would guess, we'll continue to find our way through the different challenges that we will experience. So I really appreciate that transparency. Also from our student representatives, I heard a couple things that just warmed my heart. Now, I will tell you, when this discussion was going on, I was not a fan of bringing students back into the building. I was very nervous about it. But to hear Naomi say that there was a big difference from spring to now, and to have you guys come back and be able to see that is amazing. And to hear Lucy say that she felt safe was really a big deal for me, that you felt that way, and that the story about being outside, I mean, that was something I remember commenting on in the last meeting, hoping that teachers would take advantage of that opportunity while we can. So I think that I really appreciate hearing you guys' perspective. It really makes me feel good about the decisions we've made and how far we've come. So I have one question. In the larger classes where we have distance classes and we're using paras, how do we utilize a para in the distance learning format?
So it's a great question. There's actually several ways that we do it. One of the most frequent ways we are seeing initially is a teacher will teach a lesson, and then a para will either have individual meets with the kids or small group meets with the kids. The other thing that we are seeing is the teacher is teaching a lesson to half of the kids while the para works with the other half, because that helps them all be seen on the screen and participate and engage more effectively. And then they switch groups. And so it's that second adult continuing to work with and support. And our teachers are reporting that the para presence is actually extremely helpful in the hybrid and in the hybrid distance component, and then also in the distance classroom.
Thank you, that's great.
Lucy has a question, by the way.
Yes, Lucy, go ahead.
I'm actually okay, sorry.
I was telling you to go ahead, you're good.
Where we have a para teacher, so I'm in an English class that has one, and so it was actually really nice, because you have like one teacher talking and the other can work on like a presentation or something like that. And I mean, I've only had that class once, but it went really well. So yeah, you need a student view on it.
Thank you, that's great.
I have 3 questions. The first one, Steve, you mentioned that the first week of distance learning was focused on kind of getting things up and running, and that it would, you anticipate that it would improve a lot in week 2, and Naomi kind of supported that as well in her feedback. But I was wondering if you could just say a little bit more on like, how do you anticipate the distance learning improving from last spring compared to week 1? What families
Sure.
experienced?
So in week 1, most things were asynchronous or taped in terms of our lesson. But really, if you look at our overarching district goal in week 1 and why we were doing distance was to meet with every student, meet with every family, and essentially set ourselves up and our students up for success in the distance aspect of everything we were going to do throughout the school year. So we got materials out to all our kids, we met with our families, we really talked more about the expectations and sent out a lot of activities that allowed kids to begin becoming part of a community. Then once we moved to the next week, we really began that in-person component of community building and really continued in the distance area of community building. So the next steps within distance are now really to dive into content. So if you look at schools, not just in Richfield, but also across the country, you think about their start is to make sure everybody has textbooks, everybody has technology, everybody has the materials that they need. And we have all the Chromebooks out and are now figuring out through the end of this month about textbooks and making sure we get all the materials in kids' hands. Then you really need to build that safe, secure learning community, which we have known for years that teachers do really well once their kids are in front of them. And then you move on to really diving into content. And when you take the time to build that safe, secure, effective community for all our kids that supports them on a social, emotional basis, you find that the academics move faster than if you skip that step. And so we're doing that in distance and hybrid, just like we would have done in an in-person model.
Awesome, thank you. Naomi also mentioned the Beacon program, and I was curious if they're providing in-person and digital programming this year, or one or the other.
Beacon's program is actually under Dr. Daniels, so I'm going to have her come to the microphone. They do plan to do some in-person work in our buildings, and then also some online supports, but Dr. Daniels can give you a little bit more information.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, so Beacons will be providing digital as well as in-person support. I know the team at Centennial, they are working to build out what that program looks like, but I do know specifically at the middle school, they are working very closely with administration, and they are actually aligning a Beacons representative with teachers in the classroom, and they're rotating every 2 weeks. So those Beacons personnel members can be specifically with that pod to ensure that the students are safe. At the high school is working a little differently, in which the Beacons representatives and personnel will be providing activities for students to choose towards the latter part of the day to be a part of. And so they're also offering for our students who are in the distance model activities to engage in as well. So they are actually running a hybrid model and distance model as well, and is looking different at the middle school versus the high school and elementary, but those are the supports that they're providing to, again, minimize exposure and to also provide support.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. My last question was for our student representatives. I'm curious, when the hybrid model for secondary was proposed, like not in a judgmental way, but I kind of had this feeling of like, 1 day a week, is that even worth it? And like, I could tell in what you said that it is. And I guess I just was curious, like, what value are you seeing in that 1 day a week connection with school? Or maybe if you haven't experienced it yet, because we just got started, like, what value do you hope to get out of that 1 day in person each week?
I mean, honestly, being a senior, I just want to still be like with my people, we kind of, it's the closest thing we can get to, having a senior year. So I enjoy that. I like that I can, you know, see my friends and, you know, try to be still part of the community altogether. And I don't know about like other grades and stuff, but I just like right now how it's working out. I enjoy it, and I mean, I'll for sure update you guys whenever we meet next, but I'm sure this week we'll have something different planned. So yeah.
It kind of made me choke up a little. Thank you.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I'm gonna tell the truth. There was some times when I was at school where I was like, is it worth it being on the football field like for hours? Like, Lucy, I see your face. Or isn't it worth it like just doing talking with a pot of classmates all day when I could be at home doing work, etc. But I feel like just having the social interaction for me is really important one day a week. I think it's about being seniors halfway, but also it just like reminds me that there are people who like are going through this too, you know, it's like really rough times right now. And then what else was I going to say? The school environment also motivates me to keep working hard at home because our advisory teacher is like keeping track of our like grades and going over stuff like that with us. And so it's nice, especially only having one teacher, to have like a good relationship with them and see one teacher face to face who cares and is like your support system.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like, I know that was kind of the goals behind that time, and it's just really encouraging to hear your perspectives, so thank you.
Peter, do you have comments?
Kim.
Oh, great, thanks.
I'm just happy that it's going well, so.
No, I'm in a similar boat. I really appreciate the presentation Steve gave, and I really value the comments from Lucy and Naomi. I hear it at home. I mean, Peter and I both have a 9th grader, and you have also an 11th grader.
Mm-hmm.
So I have it's working well for my child, who's kind of a self-starter, but I know that her ability to be a self-starter is not 100% across her peers, and so we interact with other kids for whom I think that touch point with the advisory teacher is going to be extremely beneficial, and that just one day is going to be very meaningful. As Lucy said, sort of a groundstone of normalcy, and check in with peers who are going through similar things, and not just your immediate self-chosen social peers, but others who are peers of yours, who aren't in your immediate social circle. So it's good to be grounded that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of my kids have opted for a full distance, and I mean, I think that this is the piece that we understand it's kind of evolving, and making sure that we're able to get that balance between the digital side and having materials that aren't on a screen and aren't necessarily involving that sort of technology side. But yeah, I mean, I think so far so good, and I think that over the summer and even in the spring, when we sort of had to make that very rapid pivot to distance, some of the reflecting with board members from other school districts and some of our regional organizations and whatnot, is that I think that one thing that may hopefully come out of this experience is more of a capacity to focus on the individual student. And we've sort of been forced by necessity to adapt very, very quickly with how we do instruction. But I think one thing that I've been really pleased with so far in Richfield is it does seem as if we put our students' needs at the center of how we're designing that. And we just have every opportunity to continue with those innovations.
I think generally what I was going to say has been shared, so I would just sort of close with I feel like what is coming through really clearly is that we have intentionally been focusing on wellness and well-being in these earliest days, and how do we create an understanding of what school looks like this year, and how to help people really feel like they can thrive and be themselves and succeed in this new and different model of schooling, and that we know we still need to focus on academics. We know that we still need to prepare our kids for the world that they are walking into, and for them to be successful in that way as well. And that is the phase that we are moving into. And so as we, go to our next meeting 2 weeks from now, and then meetings after that, I'm going to be excited to hear about what that looks like. And again, what it looks like potentially on a more individualized level than what we've been able to do in the past. So just kind of wanted to articulate that. And then also just share with Naomi and Lucy that honesty, Naomi, you said, I'm going to be honest here. Like that honesty is what we want and what we need and what we love from having you with us. So keep it coming, keep it honest, and keep sharing whatever you are comfortable sharing with us about the experiences that you're having, because it helps us do our work better. Steve, any last words that you would like to share before we move on?
Yeah, I would just echo your last words, Crystal. Basically be speaking to Naomi and Lucy and say, yes, your honesty is needed. So as you hear and you've learned, we are adults committed to serving you and your needs to set you up for your future as best as we can. And when we do well, we want to know, but also when things need to be improved upon, we also want to know, because that is what we know, or how we know exactly what we need to focus on keeping to get better. I think our board members have said it very clearly that we need to make some radical changes, and we need to continue to do that. And we need to, as we continue to go through education in the times of COVID, we need to learn new best practices. We're learning that kids are able to engage in distance learning for some better than they had in a classroom. And we are learning for others that they need to be in a classroom in front of our kids. So we're going to continue to look at what we're doing. We're going to continue to evaluate what we're doing. And I think some of the things we're learning in these times are going to help us all the way into the future, because we're learning some things that our kids need that before COVID we actually didn't necessarily know in the same way. So I look forward to us keeping and expanding those as we keep expanding and improving into our future. So thank you all for the conversation, and certainly thanks to our students for sharing their perspectives as always. It's good to have you back.
Very good to have you back. Okay, so we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is approval of the consent agenda containing routine business items. I will just pause for a moment to see if there are any questions or requests before we proceed. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I will move the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Mr. Paulus. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. So we move into old business, and there are 3 items before us this evening, all of which are existing board policies that we are reviewing for a second time this evening. The first of which is disability non-discrimination.
And just for clarification, these are actually 3 new policies.
I
and while they are new
apologize. Thank you.
policies, they are thoroughly covered within our procedures and rules. And so 403, disability non-discrimination. As a leadership team, you all asked us to continue evaluating ways to help us be more publicly accountable and transparent. So one of those ways is to move forward with creating policies that report publicly our commitment in a way that supports us as leadership on a deeper level than leaving these mandatory and required regulations within our internal procedure documents and making them public policies. So I want to say again, each of these 3 policies include procedures that we already implement. The only new component is creating them as board policies, which brings us to policy 403, disability non-discrimination. And this is a second read on page 37 of your packet, outlining that we will not discriminate against people with disabilities in regard to employment or treatment in Richfield Public Schools. It's very similar to how our other policies state our equitable and non-discriminatory expectations for the treatment of students. Policy 403 outlines the expectation that we provide equitable and non-discriminatory treatment of adults throughout our entire system. As this is a second read, it's not up for passing tonight, but we're asking for any input with the hope of moving the policy forward for passage at our next meeting. As always, input can come through email, personal communication, or in this meeting tonight. So with that, I'll open it up for any board questions, comments, or input on policy 403.
Thank you. Questions or comments from board members?
Okay. This one seems to me to be pretty straightforward. I don't have any other particular modification.
Okay.
No, I would agree with you. It is very straightforward. We're matching the MSBA model policy pretty much word for word. And as a required policy that we've previously not had, I think that's a fair start.
Are there any comments or questions from our virtual board members?
None here.
Okay, it looks and sounds like we have pretty uniform board enthusiasm and support, and so we will look forward to bringing this one back at our next meeting for tentative approval and move to the second of the new policies that we're looking at for the second time, school district system accountability.
Correct. On page 40, 602, school district accountability, outlines the way we have committees and advisories to give input to leadership. Outlines our reporting process to the public and to the board that's expected of the superintendent and district leadership. And it outlines the clear expectation that we design our educational system to support all learners and expect excellent outcomes from all of our students. Based on initial input from the board, we made multiple clarifying language changes given feedback from our team members, clarifying the role of committees, adding more clear equity-based language, and continuing to connect the language to our other policies to make sure that as we report through policy 602, it integrates all of the things that we have done in practices and makes them a clear part of our accountability for the district policy. As always, we're open to any board questions, comments, or input.
Thank you.
I did have some feedback on this policy. A couple of things. So first of all, if we look at just section 2, the general statement of policy, I'm not sure when this was originally adopted by MSBA as a model, and I think our language there is very, very similar to the MSBA model language. I just had a feeling reading that section that the accountability was future tense as opposed to present tense. And my feeling here is that this is present tense accountability. We have been doing this, and we will continue to do it. And there's also, I think, the recognition that the precise details of that accountability may evolve over time in terms of not only how we're accountable locally, but what the expectations are from the state for our accountability. So I guess that I was, even though I don't necessarily have any specific wordsmithing, I kind of was hoping that we could see section 2 really become a present tense sort of a feel to it, in that, to me, I think the purpose of that section is to essentially state our commitment to accountability.
I agree with you, and thank you for that input. I would agree that which we use in there several times, and so as we're capturing the notes, we do have a system of accountability in the district. We do have a system of actually not transitioning, but implementing graduation standards that are graduation requirements connected to the standards. We do have a system to review and improve curriculum instruction and assessment, and we do have input from parents, and we are accountable to the public. So I think you're right. I think our tense in that language is, as I review it again, incorrect, and certainly should speak to what we already do rather than something that we would theoretically be doing.
Yep. So I would counter that, though, and say that all of our policies sort of dictate what we shall and will do. It doesn't alleviate our requirement to be doing them in the present tense. It's in a sense, the policy is our breadcrumb for future boards to know what we will do.
Correct.
And will guide us on how our behaviors and practices and procedures will be. So I don't mind the future tense as long as we have it implemented in the present tense.
Yeah. And I agree with you wholeheartedly from the standpoint that sometimes that word of will, the words of shall and will, are a statement of a commitment. And I'm completely on board with using those words to be making a commitment to a principle or a particular process. So, yeah, totally agree with you on that one, Tim. Another point that in section 4A, I was just thinking that we could be clearly referencing our strategic plan as in policy 101. So I think that to me there's a little bit of a reading the policy, I continue to get the sense of sort of that model policy feel. And I felt that a big piece of what the policy needed was to be customized and tailored to what we do here in Richfield, and basically some of the accountability systems that we've already evolved. So referencing the strategic plan, and then when we talk about the advisory committee structure, I think that this would be an item for discussion, whether it's the right tack to take to be specific in terms of referencing our advisory committee structure, and kind of tightening that up a little bit. I felt like it was just a little too diffuse, and I think it just could be more specific, more Richfield specific, and I did sort of prompt me to sort of take a look through our other existing policies to see if we have, what sort of documentation we have on our advisory committees. My quick search didn't find a whole lot, so this might be an opportunity to kind of solidify some of that, sort of chartering those committees more effectively.
I did, before the last meeting, I did look it up, and they are on the website. We talked about this, there's just minimal information about them, and they're still kind of putting it together.
Yep.
Starting again from everything from last year, so.
Yep. So anyway, I think to me that's the other theme, and so really, it's hard. I guess I apologize for not being able to be fully specific, but I think that, does that make sense to you, Steve, what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I capture and repeat what I'm hearing, so we have a set of established advisories like a curriculum advisory, a technology advisory, a special ed advisory, a fiscal advisory, and a number more. I think we should refer to them in this document is what I'm hearing. I would agree with you on that. And we could also even mention in there some of their roles, as this is multiple pages on advisories and how they advise us. And so we can certainly add some of that specific detail. Does that capture it?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it will be more meaningful when you read it instead of so general and technical. It will reflect what we actually do, what our practice is.
Got it.
Yeah, I guess just one other very specific observation. Sorry, I said I was done. And that, I do appreciate some of the statement about the composition of committees and some of the reflection that committees shall attempt as best as possible to reflect the diversity of the community, and to and we're defining that diversity in many different ways, whether that's racial and ethnic diversity, whether that is diversity in terms of age or sort of your role in our community. Are you a student? Are you a parent? Are you a community member? Are you a employee or staff person? So I think the other piece that obviously different committees sort of benefit from different types of expertise. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Paulus's actuarial expertise on our insurance committee, for example. And so I think that may also be a consideration we could lay out. And not every, and again, it's, thinking about sort of that, like student participation, for example. There are some committees where student participation is critical, but I'm not sure that the students would be real thrilled about insurance advisory.
I don't know why not.
We might have a future accountant somewhere. Yeah.
So more specificity, more Richfield context, reflecting how we have been doing this, but also using it as an opportunity to get clear about what we think we should be doing moving forward is what I'm hearing. I'm going to just take a pause and see if any of our virtual board members have anything that they would like to share or ask.
No questions. Thank you.
Okay, I think then we will move on to the third of these policies, which is on public data requests.
Thank you. And finally, with these 3 new policies, I present for a second read Policy 716, Public Data Requests, beginning on page 53 of the board packet. This policy brings to the board level our procedures for responding to legal data requests, publicly stating them as a proposed policy. So much of this policy is actually governed by state statute, with only minor changes to the Minnesota School Board Association suggested model policy, but also personalize it to Richfield Public Schools. So again, as a second read, here, same thing. We're looking for comments, questions, or input with the hopes of presenting a final read at our next meeting. Back to you, Chair Brackey.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments on what is before us in this new policy?
No, I'd just say this one and the first one of these 3 new policies. The second one stands out, as Peter said. We could have some local flavor and specificity on it. The first and third here, this seemed to me like they would do well to use the model policy as much as possible, given the legal requirements that we're meeting.
Yep.
So if we're not having anything to say about those, is there something that's stopping us from passing those tonight? From holding on to them for a third read?
Steve?
Only general practices. I would say because it's a new policy, I would suggest we just bring it back since we didn't present it in that way. But if you would like us to examine that in the future, I think we have moved to 2 reads for review of policies that there aren't major changes. But you're certainly welcome to decide if you want to move it forward now.
Mask, I think, got the official 1 read.
With a ton of feedback.
With a ton of feedback early, but at the same time, in this setting, it was 1. But that was there was urgency to that one, to have it in place before people entered our buildings. We needed to have one. So
yeah,
I appreciate the point, though.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
The one thing for me on this one that I think I personally would just benefit from a little bit more time, the things I'm thinking about are the cost in terms of what people would potentially be charged. And I know what the model policy says, but I'm curious if there are public entities that actually do not charge for some amount, or just what that entails. So that is just a question that I have. And then the second thing is just the time turnaround, and what is sort of the law around time turnaround. And I assume that we have basically given ourselves the maximum amount of time allowable by law, but I would benefit from just a little bit more time in thinking about that. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to new business. We have a number of things before us that are all related to the operations of the district. So Mr. Holge is going to be with us for a good number of items here all in a row. The first up is our property liability and fleet insurance renewal.
Yes, thank you very much. I have for your approval tonight the renewal for property liability, fleet, professional and faithful performance, and cyber liability.
Sorry, I missed that one.
No, I know. We've packaged them all together into one item here. For a total renewal of that premium of $384,965. This is a $62,450 increase from our 1920 premiums. One of the big chunks associated with that is the increase in our property values with our construction projects, and we increased some of those values with that piece specifically, as well as some experiences that had an increase in our premium rate as well. There is one item here regarding our abuse and molestation claims, moving from a claims-based to an occurrence-based. In 2012, our insurance companies required that we move from an occurrence-based to a claims-based. Now, everybody has moved from a claims-based back to the occurrence-based. So one of the challenges that we have is just kind of finding that market to kind of address that appropriately. It does increase some of our exposure for that period between 2012 and 2019. We're recommending a separate premium or a separate policy here that one time will put a 3-year claims hold, I think it is. So any claims that occur in the next 3 years will be covered by that policy as well. This is specific to our abuse and molestation coverage, which really, if it's an individual action, that is separate to that individual. This is covering the organization for liability associated with things that we knew about, didn't handle appropriately, or didn't manage that. So the risk is somewhat limited. The statute of limitations for those claims can extend beyond for minors. So normally it's a 6-year policy. This extends beyond that for individuals who are younger than 18 at the time of incident, can make claims against an individual. Our coverage here specifically is if it's a situation where the district didn't handle something appropriately. We do have separate coverage in one of our other liability areas, the professional liability policy, that does cover $100,000 of liability for those situations. It's just not that $1 million claim that's a part of that. So those are kind of the highlights. You have the detail associated with each one of those areas. We are maintaining liability limit of $1 million. With a $5 million umbrella policy associated with that as well. And then in here you can see some of the loss histories and with those increases and changes associated with that, one of the driving factors with this too. And this would be recommending that we maintain with all of our current providers as part of that renewal here. When we look at the multi-year comparison in the document, our total property casualty liability, along with our workers' comp, which is also, we work with Dolph Insurance on that, is going from $743,000 to $797,000. So kind of total package with that work comp piece, it is about a 7.3% increase in this kind of book of insurance coverage that we have for the district that are not benefits related specifically. So with that, I'll respond to any questions you might have or do any follow-up.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the board?
Does everyone understand the difference between claims made and occurrence, or care to hear it?
I'm curious.
So Peter, as a physician, you might know of this. The claims made coverage, the policy that covers the claim is the one that's in force when the claim is filed. So when the plaintiff steps forward and sues you and says, this is what's happening. For example, in your job as a physician, it's not when you harmed the person by leaving the sponge inside their body during surgery, it's when they filed the claim. Okay, so if you left the sponge in someone in 2018, but they sued you in 2020, in a claims-made policy, your 2020 coverage would cover it. On an occurrence basis, it would go back to the 2018 when the event happened. So when you convert from occurrence to claims made, if someone files a claim in this current year for something that happened last year, well, if we're now in occurrence, it didn't happen in this year. The event that gave rise to it was in the prior regime when we were under claims made. And so that's the gap in coverage. So we are purchasing, or we're proposing that we purchase tail coverage, which will cover a 3-year run out of events that occurred under the other thing. The only wrinkle to this is, as Craig had said, the statute of limitations is 6 years for sex abuse, and this is our molestation coverage, which of course we never hope to read up on. And it's even further extended from if the plaintiff is a minor, which is highly likely given the setting we're in. And so there is the potential that we have years beyond as we have vicarious liability as the organization in which the employee or whoever the bad actor is or alleged to be, that we gave opportunity to them if we didn't act in it. But that's the protection that we have, and if they don't have a longer tail, that's the best we can do, then that's the best we can do. I mean, to purchase that tail endorsement to cover that run out, it just goes up as every year you would add.
Yep.
But that's the gap in complete and total coverage that we enjoyed under one that we no longer would have. And that's the risk we have. We are protected as a public entity. It's difficult to hang liability on a public entity. But that's about it.
Yep. So, and I will say that we are reviewing a few other tail options associated with that. The question for the board is those tails tend to go up to $100,000 if we're adding to a 4 or 5 or 6. And so the recommendation from Dolph is that 3 years seems to be sufficient. We are, knock on wood, not aware of any claims that have been made against these policies since 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or something like that, so it's relatively minimal. And that was something that was dismissed by the court specifically in that situation. So those are all the things that we're reviewing. I am looking at a few different options just to get pricing, but the $100,000 all of a sudden jumps this package up for quite a bit, and it still has a termination of 4 or 5 or 6 years, so it buys another 3 years per se.
We're very fortunate to have you as a resident board expert. Do you have an immediate opinion on that?
I don't. I mean, we'd have to get into some detail of how we've handled allegations in the past, and I assume we've handled them very well. And again, understand we do have some protections as a public entity. This is not, our protection is as an entity being sued for permitting or allowing or not being as strident in intervening and preventing something. And so, our protection still, if we have it for 3 years, the gap we have is, whatever happened in the last handful of years, that could run out, again, extending to the 6 years and beyond. I'm comfortable enough because if I'll ride on the heels of our insurance agents' E&O coverage for the professional advice they've given us, and I'll defer to that.
Good answer. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Anything from our virtual participants? Okay. So with that, we could entertain a motion to approve the coverage as suggested.
I'll move the coverage as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the coverage is approved. So next is certification of the proposed levy for the coming year, right?
Thank you very much. And this is preliminary levy certification. Every year in September, we come to the board and ask for authority to propose a levy to the board. In December, the board comes and actually takes action implementing that levy. There's a lot of work that occurs between now and that December board meeting of fine-tuning the numbers. All of these numbers are numbers that are calculated for us by the state, and information that's shared that really kind of transfers into what we have authority or what the voters have approved for our levy authorization. At this time, because things are still so fluid, we always ask to have the board certify the maximum levy at this point. So what that means is we put everything that we have available to us on this proposed levy that then gets reported to the taxpayers at that time. We have at times reduced that levy, or the board has that determination in December to actually choose to under levy in certain areas if they would like to. So with that, just kind of a highlight of what is currently available, and again, this is kind of a working document from the State Department of Education. It is looking like our general fund levy total will actually be decreased by about $469,000. The bulk of that is connected in with under levies and adjustments, or not under levies, but adjustments based on enrollment from previous levies. So what happens is this levy is proposed based on what we're projecting our enrollment to be for the 21-22 school year. when we haven't even really fully counted what our enrollment is for the 20 and 21 school year. It's based on that. All of that gets cleaned up as numbers become more certain. So what we're seeing here, last year we had some adjustments that were positive for us. This year we're having some adjustments that are negative for us because we haven't been able to hit our numbers exactly perfectly when we're talking about numbers that way. So if you're looking at the general fund levy in the referendum technology, the equity in a number of those areas where there is a reduction, that's calculated in the fact that we're projecting a reduced enrollment for next year, plus those adjustments from previous years. And again, that's based on current numbers and current projections that way. In the debt service fund, there are some reductions in those areas. Those most specifically have to do with bond refundings. And in debt service and debt excess, we're charged with levying 5% over what we have so that we have a reserve in place in the event we have significant adjustments in our market rates and we don't have the available taxation capacity in those areas. So with that refunding, we ended up with a reserve that was beyond what is statutory in place, so that triggered some of those under levies in the debt excess and the long-term facilities maintenance specifically. So those are some of the numbers right now. Right now, proposing that maximum still sees a reduction to the taxpayers of about $1 million. We'll continue to work on refining these numbers and making sure we have information in place for when this comes back to the board in December. And with that, I will stand to any questions. Other than that, we're asking for that proposal of the maximum levy authority at this point.
Thank you. Helpful just as the headlines for this year, but also the reminder that this is our standard practice to give us the maximum flexibility for the next couple of months before we officially take action that will affect our community and our taxpayers. Any questions or comments?
I would just ask formally, within the item you're asking us to also schedule the Truth and Taxation meeting, is that correct?
Correct, thank you.
Okay.
I got so hung
Okay.
on the numbers. I was excited about those numbers.
Nope, good flag.
Yeah, and it does schedule that as December 7th, which is the first board meeting in December.
Thank you. Okay. So we could entertain a motion to approve the preliminary levy and set the Truth and Taxation hearing date.
So moved.
I will second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The preliminary levy and Truth and Taxation hearing date are approved. Next up is assurance of compliance with state and federal law prohibiting discrimination.
Thank you very much. So this is that assurance of compliance of state and federal law prohibiting discrimination. This is something that the board has to authorize every year prior to November 15th. It is one of the things that we have to check whenever we are applying for grants or different funding sources from the state or federal government, so it assures that we're participating in all those programs and have that prohibition against discrimination. You can see in very micro print I see on this, each one of those check boxes of what the board is authorizing and affirming. We review the policies to make sure that those are in place. If there is any changes to the harassment and violence policy in the district, then we update that. So you can see that was last updated and sent in 2016, and there have been no changes since then. So with that, we ask for your approval and authorization in this assurance of compliance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
I would add that one of the new policies we have considered and we will vote on probably next meeting, would that help? Is that directionally supporting this when I think of some of the non-discrimination?
Do you mean the disability policy from this evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would further support that, yes.
Okay. I appreciated you providing the background that this is a requirement for us as we apply for grants from state or federal government, because one of my favorite things to do is to attest that we are complying with law. It just seems strange to me that we would do that when I think it's sort of a baseline that we would comply with state and federal statutes prohibiting discrimination. So
if only
I'm willing to do so.
Yeah.
All right. We could have a motion to approve, since it sounds like there are no further comments or questions.
I will move the item as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Mishak. Any further discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the assurance of compliance is approved. So now we have a bunch of facilities change orders, and so Mr. Holge is going to do an overview of all of them, and then we will take action building by building as a board.
Very good. And I think if the board is inclined, I will also summarize each one of them by building and not necessarily go over change order number 10, change order number 11, and just kind of highlight what all is included in it. First up, we have change orders 10 through 14 for Centennial Elementary School for a total of $64,069.93. This includes various changes associated with the electric scope, ceiling modifications, mechanical piping and ductwork, masonry and gypsum wallboard, concrete stoops and marker boards and some other miscellaneous areas, as well as some additional fire alarm, mechanical air transfers, and flooring in the kitchen storage changes that were required by code. So that total changes for $64,069.93, bringing that project up to $6,961,684.67. At Richfield Dual Language School, we have change orders 25 and 26, which have to do with some parking lot improvements as well as exterior scapes around the sidewalk replacement. And just a reminder, RDLS, the parking lot and the sidewalk really is a combined project with STEM, but it's the contractor at RDLS that managed that entire exterior part of the project. So that total changes for $44,177.86, bringing that project up to $9,460,762.23. At RSTEM, we have change order number 25 for $24,746.93, adding some mop sinks into some of the custodial closets at the floors to help expedite some of the cleanup that's necessary as part of that process. That brings that project up to $15,424,905.35. At Richfield High School, we have change orders 31 through 35 for a total of $149,336.34. This includes various electrical modifications, some terrazzo floor patching, as well as some concrete block wall infills, some restroom layout changes and piping routing associated with demolition and build back, temporary heating in the gymnasium last winter, as well as changes to existing conditions for conflicts in the HVAC system, and structural flooring, soffits, access panels, and there's also a credit for removing the curtain wall, which was done as a separate project. That project is now at $37,311,973.53. At Richfield Middle School, we have change orders 4 through 6 for a total of $43,347.26. This includes some design changes to the administration area, DCD suites, and science areas, as well as omission of a third floor resource that was adjusted during some design discussions, as well as modifications for ceilings and ductwork, additional cabinetry in the art storage room and some sound insulation, as well as mechanical changes in restrooms and a temporary water heater. That project is now at $16,746,313.71. And next up in the construction part of the projects, we have change orders for Sheridan Hills, change orders 11 through 13 for a total of $55,750, dealing with some mechanicals around chilled water loops, ductwork sizes and routing, some adjustments to the existing elevator equipment room, bringing that up to code, as well as some secured entry door hardware, and other mechanical plumbing areas and things like that. That project is now at $9,863,973. And then separate from kind of our construction contractors, but our abatement project, we have change order number 1 at Sheridan Hills for a net change of $35,712 for additional abatement that's required for pipe fittings and some insulation around exposed areas during demolition. As well as some asbestos that was found underneath tile that had been covered up by carpet, that once they started digging in there, they figured that they had to do that abatement. So that project is now at $130,512, up from an original $94,800. There were some questions from the board regarding kind of where are we at with our net contingency on these factors, what is our plan for moving forward, and where are we at in our total construction project. I did send some information out previously, but with our contingencies, obviously Richfield High School is the one that we've talked about in the past that's significantly over budget and is beyond that contingency. That's running about $360,000 above contingency. We've talked about that's the one that's had significant changes that we addressed specifically in the last one. We also have gone slightly over with the Sheridan Hills Elementary School at about $24,723 at this point. We do have some remaining at STEM of $75,000 remaining in that contingency out of $700,000 originally. RDLS, which is now basically completed, is at $37,680 remaining. Centennial has a contingency balance remaining of $142,515. And then Richfield Middle School has $739,000 remaining in contingency. So again, one of the things that we were able to do, because Richfield STEM School is very similar to Richfield Middle School and is pretty much an identical building with a couple adjustments of the pool and the auditorium area. So where we saw some significant changes, especially in the mechanical system at Richfield STEM School, we were able to do a better investigation of what was projected to be addressed as part of that construction project. And so most of those change orders that were identified as part of the STEM construction have been modified in the plan designs for Richfield Middle School. So we don't anticipate that significant level at that point. So we do have some contingency remaining that as a bucket still sits with some opportunities. We have also been discussing within the Project Oversight Committee and construction team where there are other savings that we're anticipating and have developed a plan specific to that. Our net over expenditure currently, including the abatement projects, is about $716,000. Obviously, we talked about the amounts that we just kind of reviewed here with some potential contingency savings. We have about $300,000 of unallocated dollars in our construction project that haven't been spent, so those will help mitigate that, as well as we've been looking at some other potential scope savings. We found that we budgeted more in our playground area than what we're really really needing. We've had some playground experts come out and take a look at the facilities, and for the most part, there's some maintenance that's needed as part of that, but we are also looking at how do we make sure that we have some consistency across our elementary schools, specifically in their playground equipment. So we think we still will be able to make significant improvements to those playgrounds, but not have to spend the entire amount associated with that, and have about $200,000 of savings there. As they got into the design work around Central School, we think there's some potential savings there, just even with mechanicals, much like we realized at Centennial Elementary School. We realized the mechanical systems were in better play and didn't need as much adjustment. We're currently in the design phase for that and are anticipating to bring Central to bid later on this fall, and so we'll have more definition on what that looks like at that point. And then we also have some dollars that are associated with maintenance buildings like our bus garage, those areas, as well as some of the ancillary buildings and facilities, where we're not anticipating that we'll need that full amount that's been identified and budgeted for in that area. We haven't started the design work specific in those areas, but we intentionally left that maintenance building chunk towards the end of it so that we knew that we could have each one of our schools and our classrooms and really focused in those areas moving forward at that. So that kind of summarizes the plan. With that, there's potentially of $1.7 million of current funds that are potentially available. We're not necessarily anticipating that we'll need that, but we have a good, we're in a good situation, knock on wood, please, that we have a good plan that will not negatively impact what we've designed for programming for each one of these sites. So with that, if there are any other questions or discussion, otherwise I'd turn for approval for those various change orders at each one of the buildings.
Yeah, let's take overarching or specific questions first before we move into the individual action items.
The asbestos, I mean, there's nothing we can, they find asbestos, we're told we have to remove it, I understand that. That I believe we have a separate levy or mechanism for paying for abatement, is that accurate?
Yep, so asbestos abatement is one of the things that we traditionally build into our LTFM funding. So we've done a lot of asbestos abatement over the years, pulling out tile, and so you've seen this every year when we talk about construction projects. So we can use LTFM dollars for that specifically. That's another added resource outside of this construction project that we're taking a look at. Are there things that we would have been doing that we can just suspend in that area, or we're doing now because we're expediting that part of the process?
But I mean, when they find it, it's a low-grade hostage situation. You have to take it out.
Yeah.
There's no...
Especially if you've already
Or
started...
stop disturbing it in any possible way.
Especially if you've started the demolition, unless you want to stop the demolition. So what we found, especially at the high school, was we opened up walls and we found asbestos. Or we dug 40 feet into the ground and found a cable that was wrapped in asbestos, and that was one of the larger expenses.
You want to keep it safe 40 feet underground. You wrap it.
Yeah. We have limited opportunity to kind of adjust that. If we know about things, we can phase things differently. There are some options around individual funding if we have asbestos abatement projects over $100,000 at any one site, similar to what we did with the indoor air quality. Most of ours have not hit that category, and given kind of where we had the construction projects, I think we didn't pursue that specifically like we did the indoor air quality projects.
I suppose we just did at Sheridan Hills, or we're possibly going to, right? I mean, if it's budgeted to 130 now,
So it kind of now popped over where we could have done it, but it wasn't necessarily planned for at that point.
My only other question is, I'm not asking this in a threatening manner, just procedurally, what if we just said no to these change orders? What then?
So some of these, the smaller dollar amounts, you've already pre-approved, so those were moving forward as part of that process. Some of them, we've been negotiating with the contractors on the changes over time, and so then we would push back on the contractors and see where that rationale is, and it could end up in a fight if it was something that was unavoidable for them to continue to make that change.
And if that were the case, it seems as though the work, of course, has already been spec'd and actually performed. So there could come a stage if someone were feeling strongly enough where they could say, I am absolutely not interested in any more of these. I mean, if someone said that, or even in any small part of the whole thing. And so if that somehow gains traction with the board, that would be problematic, correct?
It would be problematic, and the other piece that we'd likely face significant delays moving forward if that was something that we weren't seeing was a positive moving forward. So if each one of these had to wait to have that full authority and full approval, we would end up with basically a 10-year project.
Sure.
Because a lot between board meetings and things like that, getting the details for that final approval. What I do know is ICS and WOLD both thoroughly review and negotiate actively with the contractors on the appropriate pricing and verify that it matches everything within the industry standard. So what has taken some of this, some extended time to, like the electrical piece where we hit and we couldn't do anything, we're kind of stuck in, either we don't do it or we move forward. There was a lot of negotiations around what is the appropriate pricing with that because it was such a large dollar amount. And they do that same thing even with the smaller items as well.
And I feel like this is obviously where the responsibility of the project oversight committee is significant, because that is the group of people who really is in the details on this. And I think if they start to wave the flag that we are uncomfortable with the patterns that we are seeing, I think that's when we need to get ahead of it instead of dealing with things that are potentially already in progress. Actually, how do we have the bigger picture conversation about the work yet to come and concerns about how that might play out. So I'm looking to Christine because I know she represents us very well in that group, as do you, Craig. But that's sort of how I think of that.
I think that those are good points, and we have relied on Christine and Craig to give us the information and provide that level of comfort.
And this conversation all goes on. It's very open, clear discussion. I always feel like they're very ready to answer my questions and very available when things come up. So, and as we've gotten closer to the end, and as school approached, I asked if they would, I asked Andy if he would put together just a summary of where things were, because we all had those concerns about things being ready and not having it like the first year when we had teachers trying to get into their rooms on Labor Day weekend. So they've been very responsive to that. And then when I've had questions about, I can't remember, it was marker boards or something and the cost of it, and I just couldn't get my head around that. But I just asking and had a conversation with them, and they explained kind of what Craig just said about how they really do negotiate on our behalf about the cost of things, and things like countertops that there was an issue with. And I mean, they really are right there, and they work out all of those cost questions before it gets to our level of approval. But I think they do a really good job. I've learned a ton being on that committee. It's been fun.
Thank you.
And I would say much of this is really not discretionary within our control. So when they start building an HVAC system and they run into a concrete barrier, they need to find a different way of doing it, which then increase the cost associated with that. And so that's a matter of how much were they able to destroy before they start to figure those out. So a lot of this is uncontrollables. Very few of these are kind of subjective decisions. All of those things that are subjective decisions come for formal approval by the Project Oversight Committee, from additional cabinet work or things like that that are outside of the systems that would vary from those things.
I'd also say they did a really good job in being that our STEM and the middle school are essentially the same building. The things that they put together for that, they anticipated in how they price things out for the middle school projects. And I think that those are the kinds of attention to detail that have really helped us, I think. So.
Any additional questions or comments about any of the orders before us? If not, we can begin the process of approval. First up being Centennial Elementary change orders 10 through 14. We can entertain a motion to approve.
I will move approval of the Centennial Facilities Project change orders 10 through 14 as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Malik and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the change orders are approved. So we move to Richfield Dual Language School change orders number 25 and 26.
I will move the RDLS change orders 25 and 26 as presented.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the change orders are approved. Next, we have Richfield STEM School change order number 25.
I will move to approve the facility change order number 25 for Richfield STEM School.
I will second.
We have a motion by Ms. Mishak. I'll give Ms. Malik the second on that one. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The change orders approved. Now we have Richfield High School change orders 31 through 35.
I will move to approve Richfield High School facility change orders 31 through 35.
Second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Smishek and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The change orders are approved. Next is Richfield Middle School change orders 4 through 6.
I'll move RMS project change orders 4 through 6.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Malik. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The change orders are approved. Next is Sheridan Hills Elementary change orders 11 through 13.
I move to approve Sheridan Hills Elementary School facility change orders 11 through 13.
I will second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Mishek and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The change orders are approved. And last up, we have a motion, or we do not yet have a motion, but in front of us is Sheridan Hills Elementary abatement change order number 1. If there is a motion, now would be the time.
I'll move the asbestos abatement change order number 1.
I will second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Mr. Tensing. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. The change order is approved. Mr. Holge, thank you. That was a long time for you to be with us. It looks like you're about to say something.
I just want to add one more thing, just as a reminder. Every Monday, we're posting facility construction project updates on the district website, and so there's an opportunity to see where we're at with the status, but also there's some great pictures of snapshots for those people who aren't able to get into the schools and take a look at what's happening and kind of updates on that. So that gets posted on the district website generally every Monday, and the most recent one is up there right now, so I just invite people to start exploring some of our schools too.
Thank you for the reminder. And last but not least, in new business, we want to recognize a donation made to the district since our last board meeting. Superintendent Yanowski.
Yes, so absolutely. So Richfield Senior High received a donation of $10 to the Target Employee Contribution Program. So while they stay anonymous, we appreciate the Target employee for naming us with that $10 donation. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the donation?
I move that we accept the donation with gratitude.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Cole. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Bless you. Any
Aye.
opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and the donation is accepted with gratitude. We move into advanced planning, which as always will begin with an opportunity for any legislative updates that Superintendent Yanowski or Board Member Peter Tensing would like to share.
I do have, let me think about this one for a moment.
Okay.
Do you want to jump in there?
He had a no gesture on the video
You had a
screen
no
behind
gesture?
you.
Correct. I have nothing significant, at least at this time.
Yeah. That's right. I knew that there was something from AMSD,
Okay.
and I was like, why was I blanking on that? Yes, AMSD, at our last AMSD meeting, we had a sort of an annual thing where Bill Morris and Peter Leatherman do a survey, a public opinion survey regarding the state of, really it's sort of frequently looking at public school financing issues, referendum support, and of course this year a bunch of their survey was looking at sort of the feeling about from around the state how folks are feeling about public schools and the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that the key finding from that survey was still just sort of a fairly general sense of that public schools are still sort of really being viewed as a sort of a critical public asset in this time, and the overall support for public schools was strong, sort of across the state, and no reason to believe that that we were seeing any shift in that regard. They also did touch on the presidential election politics. I don't know that there's really anything terribly fascinating to share that isn't probably already widely known out there in the media. So,
Okay, thank you. With that, let's transition just into general information and our questions that members of the board would like to share. Paula, Lucy, Naomi, is there anything that you three would like to share?
I don't have anything to share. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm good also.
Okay, thanks, Naomi.
I have nothing else to share either.
Thank you, Lucy. I have two things. One, and I alluded to this at the beginning of the meeting, is I did just want to share that there is work continuing to take place around the conversations that we have had as a board around student resource officers. So I would say the two things there, one is that discussion is underway with the city around revising the contract for this current school year, given some of the things that we have discussed and feedback that we heard directly from our students. So Steve is taking the lead on that work with the city at the moment. And then the second thing is I do want us to come back and have another conversation at the board level this fall about the work that we are going to do this school year to really deliberately and thoughtfully consider models for the long term, so beyond this school year. And so just wanted to sort of publicly share that that work is taking place and that yes, we need to and will be having another board conversation in the short term once we have a sense of what our plan for that is going to be for this school year. The second thing, and Steve already did some of this earlier, but I just want to share some appreciation for Scott Nelson, who is behind a computer screen here in this room with us. He's here for the final time tonight as our multimedia extraordinaire. He's the person behind the camera and the sound for our meetings. So while those of you who are loyal viewers never see him, we could not do this without him. And that has been, I would say, especially true the last 6 months in terms of making virtual meetings and now making hybrid board meetings happen. So Scott, we deeply appreciate you. We're excited for the opportunities ahead for you and hope that we'll still be able to see you again a little bit here and there. So thank you for everything. Okay, our next board meeting will be on Monday, October 5th at 7:00 p.m. And then after that, we'll meet again on Monday, October 19th with time at the beginning of the meeting for public comment. Are there any items that board members would like to request for discussion on an upcoming agenda? If so, now is the time to let us know. Okay, I don't see or hear anything. So we will now consider a motion to move into closed session as allowed by Minnesota State Statute 13D.03 for the purposes of labor negotiation strategy. Do we have a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Paulus and a second by Ms. Smishek. Any final discussion? All those in person and in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ms. Cole?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. So after a very brief recess to close the room, we will begin closed session and just want to share that there will be no further business other than to adjourn the meeting after the closed session ends. So thank you to everyone who has been with us and has been watching this board meeting up to this point. We hope you have a great night.
Hey, Kristen, just remind us on 5th, there may or may not be the last.
Got it. Thank you. Okay.
Got it.